Let me bring in now the retired Major General, now Liberal Senator for New South Wales, Jim Molan. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Chris, good evening.
Jim, it must be terribly distressing for you to see what's happening in Afghanistan. What do you believe the consequences will be for that country and that region in the months and years to come?
Chris, I think your editorial summed it up very, very well. I think that we will face not just a total change in geostrategic issues in that part of the world, but the personal disasters for the Afghan people, more trauma for our 39,000 soldiers who served honourably in that country. But there are extraordinary lessons in this. I think that there is still a chance that the Taliban will permit the withdrawal of people who want to go now. The Americans seem to be in strength at the international airport, and there's no reason that I can imagine now while the Taliban, who have won, want to take on a whole bunch of well-armed Americans, supposedly 5,000, with Apaches, helicopters, and the full gamut of defensive gear at the airport. So I think there will be a period in which we can get people out, but that just illustrates how we have not we particularly Australia. I think Australia hasn't done too badly, but the way the West has managed the leaving, we've stuffed up the stabilisation of the country, and now we've stuffed up the leaving of the country, and I think that's where the tragedy is.
Jim, there's something more fundamental here, isn't there? Because we've seen what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, it's not a popular view, but I know what Iraq was like in 2007 and 2008, and then when the surge recovered the situation. If US and coalition troops had stayed there and stabilised that country for maybe decades to come, the world would have drawn great benefits. Instead, we got ISIS and everything unfolding in the Middle East. It's the same for Afghanistan. We pretend that we can go there for a decade or two and then pull out and things are going to be okay. Yet after the Second World War, NATO didn't withdraw from Western Europe, and the US hasn't withdrawn from East Asia. We need to be committed to peace in the long term.
We do, and I think this is a critical lesson, because we've forgotten that the occupation of Japan and our presence in Japan, in South Korea and in Germany and in Europe went, as you said, for absolute decades. And Afghanistan is even more challenging. Iraq was difficult enough, and when we pulled out of Iraq in 2011, my view was that given the nature of Iraqi society, where quite often the politicians and the military commanders would be stealing the soldiers' money, to have a presence standing next to those Iraqi commanders to make sure they did the right thing by their soldiers, so their soldiers would fight for them. I got reports, Chris, which say that for the last 18 months, the logistics support for the Afghan army has just been appalling. The casualties were not evacuated, the fire support was not coming in, the food and ammunition was not being sent forward, and for 7 months, the Afghan army has not been paid. Now, why would a young soldier fight for their commanders or their country in that situation? You can't do this stabilisation and transition to democracy fast.
Now, apart from the Taliban getting rid of education for girls, imposing their very draconian rules, their zealotry across the country, what's going to happen in geostrategic terms? Who is going to play Afghanistan? Is it going to be primarily a proxy for Pakistan, or will we see Iran get involved?
Well, I'm quite sure the inter-services intelligence in Pakistan will be doing exactly what they can. The first country to recognise the Taliban, I suspect, will be China or Pakistan, if it hasn't happened already. Shia Iran will have an interesting relationship with the Sunni Taliban. And of course, Russia has been paying the Taliban a bounty for each US soldier killed. So this is the centre of the geostrategic world here, and the power relativities around here will go, but it will not be good for the credibility of the Western world. And this is, Russia and China believe that we, the Western world, Western civilization, and I use that in its broadest term to include Japan and the democracies throughout the world, are in decline, seriously in decline. And this world is not run on love and appreciation of good things. It's run on the basis of strength and a touch of fear. And unless we can recover ourselves, after we lost Vietnam, we did win the Cold War. But that took a mighty American president to come in and do that, and a lot of sacrifice and a lot of years. Can we do it again? This is going to be the question, and this is the question for Australia. And this is what we've got to remember. Who's next? You know, we've gone through all these countries that we've failed. Who is next? Is it Taiwan? And then that other little democratic country of 25 million people in the Indo-Pacific, which is Australia.
It is frightening. Jim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Senator Jim Molan there, retired Major General, as you know, led our forces in Iraq, talking about this new weakness we're seeing projected by the US as manifest now in Afghanistan. That emboldens the enemies of the US, the enemies of freedom in this world. Difficult years ahead, no doubt.